welcome to CheersToFearYT, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We're your two hosts. I'm Alex.
And I'm Tucker. Today we will be making a drinking game for Martyrs, written and directed by Pascal Laugier, who has written and directed other movies such as The Tall Man and Incident in a Ghostland. To clarify, we are basing this drinking game off of the original 2008 Martyrs. This version may be in French, but it is much more well received, so this is why we are doing a drinking game on this version and not the 2015 remake.
Martyrs follows two childhood friends, Lucy and Anna. Lucy was kidnapped and abused as a child, and she finally found the people that are responsible for it as she now sets off to take her revenge. As Lucy breaks into the house, she calls Anna and makes her come over to meet her in the house. Lucy then starts to get attacked by an entity that constantly follows her and tries to harm her. As Anna starts to investigate the house, she starts to wonder what she can and cannot believe as she starts to go further down the rabbit hole.
Martyrs is a movie that is much more shocking when going into it blind for the first time, which is why we recommend that you watch it now, as we will be talking about spoilers shortly. We do have the rules posted on screen so that you can play the drinking game without being spoiled by our video. Now that we have that out of the way, let's take a look at the rules and totals for them.
So let's move on to the first rule, which is death. The total amount of deaths for this movie came to 7.
Yeah, and we won't go into extreme detail or anything, but there was the family in the beginning that died, Mademoiselle obviously in the end, the martyr that Anna saves, and Lucy. So that's all the deaths. We won't tell you how they died, but we'll tell you who died, I guess.
We're introduced to other martyrs, but in the pictures it's revealed that they're alive. I mean, it's assumed that they don't live too long after that.
Yeah, but we don't see their death. We see them when they're alive. You know, it's like,
it's like if we see a really old photograph, we aren't going to assume that every one of the photographs is dead.
Exactly.
We won't take a drink for that.
Yeah.
Even though they're on basically as close as you can come to death. We
exactly.
We didn't include it as a death.
Yeah. Moving on to the second rule that we always include in our drinking games, it's screams, cries, and yells. If you hear one, you take a sip. And this gave us 15 sips in the movie.
So this rule feels like it should be a lot more just because of the last third of the movie was just constant abuse, screaming, crying, name it.
I think it's the first part of the movie, first half of the movie or so, you don't get that much screaming, crying, yelling. There is obviously some throughout the whole movie, but it gets turned up in the end. Mm-hmm. And even for the end of the movie, I don't know, some of it, it's you don't really hear the screams or anything going on because she's past the point of feeling pain almost. Mm-hmm. She's kind of she's kind of out of her own mind at certain point she gets to. So even once it hits that point, there's not much screaming happening there. So it makes sense why it's lower, but it's still a good amount.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next rule, which is whenever wounds are shown on somebody's body, you take a sip, and this came to a total of 23.
Yeah, and it could be open wounds, closed wounds, bruises, whatever, any marks on somebody's body count. Obviously, don't count every individual wound on a person's body because that would be insane. You'd be pausing every frame to see how many cuts or bruises somebody has. Just whenever you see any collection of wounds, count it in that scene. Even when you do that, it's quite a bit of drinks for this rule.
Yeah.
Anyways, we'll move on to rule number 4. It's whenever there's a reference to the past, and this could be photos, flashbacks, etc. It happened 9 times in the movie.
And just some examples of that are past martyrs and even Anna's and Lucy's past.
Mm-hmm. And we mentioned the past martyrs in the pictures that we didn't include for death, but this is kind of where they come into play. Mm-hmm. And there's another rule where they come into play later too, but this is one example where they will give you some drinks.
Yeah. Now let's move on to rule number 5, which is whenever somebody is physically harmed in some way, you take a sip, and this came to a total of 21.
Yes, so some examples are if, someone's getting punched or beaten, abused, someone's getting cut by something. Some examples that you might not think about is we counted when Mademoiselle was introducing those new mortars, the pictures that we've been talking about. She is explaining what happened to them or how they were, messed up or whatever. And so we counted a drink for each individual time one of those were explained as well. So just things like that is what you're looking for this rule. Yeah. Moving on to rule number 6, it's whenever the ladder to the basement is used or shown in frame. And this happens 7 times in the movie.
Yeah, the main reason that this doesn't happen too often is just because it's in the last third of the movie.
Yeah, and it's just something kind of random and obscure that we noticed happens a good handful of times. Mm-hmm. Not too much, but there's a lot of rules that happen quite a bit, so we needed some balance to this.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of rules that are only in the last third of the movie, we have whenever somebody is fed, you take a sip, and this came to a total of 5. There was one scene in the beginning, though, that I guess I should add. I think she was just, it was just Anna eating a sandwich before she's even in the house.
Yeah. But generally it's just them being fed that slop in that room or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's pretty nasty looking.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's move on to rule number 8. It's whenever Lucy sees the woman that harms her. And this gave us 6 drinks.
And I guess this is generally stemmed from the trauma that she's received from when she was a martyr.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is just a common instance with most martyrs, as the other woman that Anna tried to save was trying to cut off her arm as she saw cockroaches, and I think it was explained.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's obviously trauma-induced. There's not actually a woman that's there physically harming her. She's doing it to herself, but she's having these visions of this person that's actually harming her when it's really just her brain because of the trauma that she's suffered. She's kind of like schizophrenic, I guess you'd say, because of the trauma she faced as a kid.
Moving on to the next rule is when Anna tries to help somebody that is suffering, you take a sip, and this came to a total of 8 sips.
Yeah, we see her helping several different people. We see her helping Lucy. She's helping that mom that was shot in the beginning. She didn't actually die from the shotgun, so we see her trying to help her. Even the other martyr she was helping escape until she got shot. Everyone she's helping dies in the end, but she still does her best to try and help, and it goes to show, like, it's a testament to her character, I guess.
Mm-hmm. She's a very nurturing person.
And speaking of martyrs, it leads us to our final rule of this drinking game. It's whenever a new martyr is introduced, and this happened 12 times in the movie.
Yes, and I feel like the scene where Mademoiselle, is that her name? Mademoiselle? Yeah, she introduces quite a few martyrs, and I think along with that, we took some other sips, such as harm occurring to another person.
Mm-hmm.
I think that scene alone gave us at least 10.
Oh, yeah, at least 10.
Probably more.
Probably 15 even.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's, like, technically none of these people were martyrs, because they didn't actually ascend and make it to martyrdom, but for the sake of explaining the rule, it's easier to just call them a martyr.
Yeah.
There's no actual true martyr in the movie until Anna comes around. She's the actual only martyr that they've successfully, transferred or ascended to martyrdom. I don't know how to explain it, but the point is anybody that was attempted to be a martyr is what we drink for.
Mm-hmm. And that is all for the rules that we have for this drinking game. The total number of sips comes to 113, and that is the equivalent of drinking just barely under 4 standard 12-ounce cans, and that's of course based off our 30 sip per can scale.
Yeah, overall the drinking game was fairly well paced, fairly easy. It's a good kind of middle ground for drinking games, I'd say. The only scene where it was very hard to get through was when Mademoiselle sits down with Anna, like we were talking about in the several rules, where 2 things were mercied, and we almost mercied death as well, but we didn't count those as deaths because technically they weren't alive, like we described. But yeah, that scene was pretty tough to get through. The rest of the movie was overall pretty good. Like, there wasn't a little amount of drinking, there was a good amount, but it was paced relatively well, I'd say.
Oh yeah, definitely. 113 I feel like is a little bit under the average, especially since we started our channel with a lot of, I'd say, slasher movie, gore movies. So I'd say that this is still fairly average for the most part.
Yeah. And speaking of gore, I'd say this is one of the top torture movies, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
It's done very well, and it's not just showing, abuse and torture for the sake of being shocking. There's actually, like, a point to it, and there's actually a story behind it, and it's not just shocking. Even though obviously it is shocking, but there's a good story being told alongside with it. So it's not like, it's just very well done, I guess.
Oh yeah. No, the story itself is actually really intriguing, especially getting around the whole, like, torture, which, to be fair, and for some people's books could be one of the main selling points of the movie, but the story itself is very intriguing.
Oh yeah.
To say the least, anyways. Some scenes were hard to get through, such as I hate the slop the most.
Okay.
Which, there's a lot worse scenes for sure, but just having, like, a bad gag reflex it just makes me want to vomit.
That's fair. I'd say, like, the constant beatings, or, like, when Anna's getting just beaten, it's, like, hard to watch because it looks real. It looks like they don't put any goofy sound effects to make it sound like a hard punch or anything. It sounds like a thud, like it would sound like when you're getting punched. And I don't know, it just feels real. And even when you see the martyr that Anna saves, I don't know her name, but the one that she saves and gets escaped, who ends up dying in the end anyways, but watching that helmet getting ripped off her head, and you see all the pus and nails and stuff getting out of her head, it was pretty nasty, but I loved it at the same time because it made me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I'd say the first 25 minutes of the movie, maybe, they're not as bad as the ending. The ending's a lot harder to get through. The beginning, it's pretty tame, I'd say, for the most part. Mm-hmm. There's some scenes, but it's not too difficult. It's nothing you haven't seen in a horror movie, really.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's people that are fairly young getting killed, which I would say is interesting, especially, that's definitely an interesting concept. But the thing is that I really love about how that whole family just gets slaughtered is just how shocking it is. They seem like a happy family. Everybody's getting along, joking.
Yeah.
Brother and sister in love, which is weird. But anyways, no, they're all having a good time, and then just Lucy comes in and blasts them.
Well, and even when she does come in, you see, she kills the mom and dad very easily because we find out later that they were behind the whole scheme and the martyrdom going on, all that. They were behind that cult or whatever that was going on.
Yeah.
But the kids obviously had nothing to do with it. So you could see in her face how hard it was for her to actually shoot the kids and kill them. Mm. She was tears rolling down her face, and she really didn't want to do it, but she felt like she had to because she couldn't have any witnesses or whatever. She's
looking away and kind of regretting her decision a little bit. Yeah, it's a hard scene to kind of get through, even when you know that she's probably in the right, and you just feel bad for the kids, right?
You understand why she's doing it, but also you understand why she doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, that's the best way of describing it.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of the other martyr, the freed martyr, maybe we'll call her, and Lucy, is they start to have visions of things that end up harming themselves, such as cockroaches that you want to dig from under your skin, or the woman that wants to harm you. I feel like it's kind of a running theme with martyrs is they have, I guess, someone that wants to cause them pain or some way that makes them self-harm.
Yeah.
And I feel like, is that part of ascending to martyrism? I'm not too sure.
You mean they get to the point where they have these visions and you think that might be one step towards the martyrdom?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it could be. Because it is clearly a running theme, like you said, through the martyrs that we get some backstory for, at least. I feel like it's something that, just came with the trauma that they faced, and, they're going through all this torture, basically, to try and ascend, and they're just not really, I don't know, they just go through so much shit, and when they're finally free, they still have that experience in their brain, and, they just don't know how to deal with it, so I feel like they almost create something that helps them deal with it. Obviously, in Lucy's case, she's cutting her arms, cutting herself and stuff, and she's envisioning that it's this other entity or something that's carving her arm, and maybe it's a justification in her brain as to why that's happening, and she's not doing it to herself, it's something else that's doing it to her, and it could just be the trauma involved with that, and trying to justify the harm that she's doing to herself, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I kind of thought of when saying that, I remember in the movie when Anna's getting tortured, I think she envisions or hears the voice of Lucy in her head that basically just tells her to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that's connected to becoming a true martyr or having the ability to be a true martyr even.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's an interesting concept too, because she hears Lucy's voice.
Yeah.
And obviously Lucy's voice isn't the person to harm her. She, if anything, wants her to keep going so other people don't have to push through this.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I got from it anyways.
Yeah.
Another thing that I found interesting about this movie is the bond between Anna and Lucy. So, for example, there's one scene in the bathroom where I think Lucy's kissing Anna's neck for some reason,
mm-hmm.
and then Anna straight up kisses Lucy on the lips, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm not sure if Anna was in love with Lucy or what was happening with them,
mm-hmm.
but I feel like there was something more to that. I feel like that they were more than friends or something along those lines, or at least Anna had those feelings for Lucy, which is why she came to basically a murder scene for her.
Yeah. Well, I know they did a really good job of showing how they had a super strong bond. Like throughout the movie, we learn that, and we see it, through the flashbacks. They were growing up together, not in a great setting, but they were growing up together. And yeah, I think they, just because of all the stuff they went through, I feel like that just made them so much closer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it goes without saying that we have to discuss the ending of this movie, and obviously spoilers, but I feel like there's so many different ways you can look at it, different theories on what it means or like how it ends and what's actually going on. So we see the ending where Mademoiselle, she says to, I forget the guy's name, but she says to him to keep doubting because, Anna just whispered in her ear something. We don't know what she said. We see Anna go into this white space where she's like ascended to martyrdom or whatever, and she told Mademoiselle what she saw. We don't know what she saw because it was just white from our perspective, and then Mademoiselle tells them to keep doubting and then shoots herself in the head, killing herself. So what's your theory as to what that meant? Like, why did she say keep doubting?
I have absolutely no idea. I'm the kind of person that, like, I love other theories. Like, I looked up and down online for everything I could.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of the best ones I could find is that there's no afterlife and she just did feel guilty.
Yeah.
The one theory that I came up with, which could be possible, is that they were all just summoning demons. I feel like that makes sense because things like, for example, the cockroaches in the skin, just seeing things that aren't really there, such as the other girl that was tortured for Lucy's sake, and then all of a sudden Anna comes back. I feel like especially doing these types of things helps you not reach God, but reach like the devil, right? I feel like that would make a lot more sense, but then again, all theories are right in a sense, right?
Yeah, it's your way of it's the way you interpret it, honestly. I feel like, I do think, for me personally, I am the one that believes like there is no afterlife, there's nothing there, and Mademoiselle just kind of felt guilty that she put so many people through this, and that's why she offed herself. But I don't know, that's just the way I see it. There's also ways to look at it too, like she felt like the afterlife wasn't worth the wait, so she kind of just skipped the line. Like she wanted to be a part of it,
She's like, we're going in.
But the fact that she said keep doubting, it leads me to believe it isn't that, but maybe she also just doesn't want them to find out. I don't know. But the suit, like when she killed herself, I feel like that could have been an act of repentance too. I don't know, there's so many different ways and theories to look at it, I think. But for me personally, it's she just felt guilty and that there is no afterlife.
I feel like that would make a lot of sense, especially since the realization that she tortured all these people for nothing.
Well, exactly.
But then again, she said keep doubting. I feel like that means that there's something awful in the afterlife that awaits her. And I feel like that she just felt guilty, wanted to kill herself, or there is nothing. That's the thing. So I feel like just the words keep doubting has like, it gives so many meanings to it. Like you have to like really think of what it means, and there's so many ways
obviously
it could be interpreted.
we didn't touch on everything.
Definitely. So overall, what were your thoughts on the movie?
Overall, I'll start by saying it's not for the faint of heart, for sure. A lot of people watch this movie and they say they love this movie, but they'll never watch it again. Like it's such a good movie, but they don't recommend watching it because of how gruesome and disturbing it gets. But for me, like, it does disturb me, and that's part of the reason why I love it, because it takes a lot to disturb us because we're so desensitized. But apart from how disturbing it is, it also gives a story along with it, and it's not just disturbing for the sake of shock. It has a story, and a intriguing story at that. And just like the way it ends, we talked about how it's up in the air on what it could really mean. I like how they ended it like that and left it up to interpretation. I don't always like when they leave things up to interpretations in movies, but this is one example where I think it was a good choice for them to do it.
I hate things where it's left up to interpretation just because I'm the type of person that loves answers.
You want closure.
I want closure, and I will never get that with this movie, which sucks. But at the end of the day, this movie was very well done. Like, just from the way that they talked about martyrism, to the ending, to the relationship with Lucy, and even when Lucy kills the family, she's like having a hard time doing it.
Yeah.
It's not like an average like torture horror movie at all. When people say the torture horror movies, they think of things such as Saw, for example, or even like maybe even Texas Chainsaw. Hostel, definitely. But this one actually has a very compelling storyline compared to all of those.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Saw, you can kind of talk about, like, Jigsaw's morality and, like, how you become a better person through suffering. But I feel like this definitely does it on a whole different level, for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And after all that being said, we've finally come to our award ceremony, where we award one not-so-lucky nominee the Darwin Award. This award goes out to a character that made a stupid decision that resulted in them getting killed, somebody else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening that could have easily been avoided. This award can also be given to a character that is just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Today's first nominee is Lucy for breaking into the house and staying there way too long while leaving a good amount of fingerprints all around the house to connect the evidence back to her.
Next is Anna for also staying inside of the house for at least 30 hours while it was only a matter of time before people arrived in the house. She had no reason to stay after Lucy died.
The final nominee today is Marie for choosing under the bed as her hiding place of choice. The problem with that is she could have easily chosen a room with a lock on the door, or somewhere that wouldn't be the first place anybody would check in an easy game of hide and seek.
And the winner is Anna. Let's be honest, she stays in the house way too long, and it results in her being captured and turned into a martyr.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our look into Martyrs. If you ended up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any other feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below.
If you want to check out our most recent video, click on the box on the top right, or if you want to see a playlist of all of the drinking games and movies we review, click on the box below. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying,
Cheers to fears.